There's a new patch next week that is both massive and irrelevant, and democracy is at work in World of Warcraft with sobering but very familiar results. Hey, it's Soul, and this is Warcraft Weekly, the show where everything is fine. It's fine. If you could do us all a favor though and hit the like button, subscribe for more WoW coverage, catch me live, and let's get right to it. New patch, new week. What matters? I'll give a closer look as to just what's coming next week in the usual Monday reminder video, but in case you missed it, here's the high-level overview of what's coming next week, which will not include the previously announced Twitch drop, by the way. That's going to be put off until the week after, and I'll remind folks about that later. As for the patch on Tuesday and Wednesday, we can visit Belemeth. It's the new Night Elf settlement west of the Anarn Plains. Both factions are going to be welcome, and you're going to find some epilogue quests as well as some Night Elf themed transmog just kind of lying around waiting to be picked up. I would advise not worrying about add-ons like handy notes to track them. Just, give yourself this moment to explore the settled zone, to talk to familiar characters, and hang out. It's not just the Night Elves, but the Worgen will be taking their capital back. There's no details on how to even start that quest just yet, but most of the faction lore-based stuff in Dragonflight, it's been pretty fun. I'm going to call it right now, which means I'm totally wrong, but here's what I think is going to happen. The Worgen are going to be spearheading the resettlement, that's kind of obvious. There's going to be trouble, and their Forsaken neighbors are going to lend a helping hand against a mutual enemy. Now, y'all might be like, ew, this is like Warcraft, not Peacecraft, but let me remind you that the bedrock of the Warcraft franchise is two meatheads going at it until something else pops up, and then they're like, hey, let's fight that thing instead, and hopefully they win. The Azerothian Archives event is going to go live this coming week. From the get-go, it's an evergreen feature. There's no player power. It's very simply, it's an activity that you do for currency. You get cosmetics that are reminiscent of the Recruiter Friend outfit and more. And there's no rush. You can just hop in whenever you like, get sweaty over it if you want to, or come back like a few years later. The experience is going to be pretty much the same. Finally, there are two massive changes incoming. Dragon riding is going to be a thing in every flyable zone. The max speed isn't going to be quite as high as in the Dragon Isles because some zones are just that dense and they don't really warrant the full speed of dragon riding when you're hopping from like point to point. Even when taking the longest kind of flight, which is a much bigger distance across the Dragon Isles, the lower max speed doesn't make all that much of a noticeable difference, at least not to me. I still got to where I wanted to go a heck of a lot faster. And the long-awaited follower dungeon feature is going to go live, targeted primarily to those who want a dungeon experience that is, if nothing else, their own, with no one there to rush them. I want to point out that this is a massive feature, but for an audience that may not watch many WoW videos or participate in WoW's more vocal community, many who are part of that louder crowd are going to ignore this whole feature because, well, they're not going to get significant experience points here at all. Like, this is not for leveling. And the feature is limited to normal dungeons, so folks can complete quests and maybe find certain crafting recipes. And I want to point out something that had just dropped. Let me just read it off screen. With follower dungeons arriving next week in the Seeds of Renewal content update, we've added some precautionary measures for the feature's initial release to help ensure a smooth experience for all players. The initial limit will be that a maximum of 10 follower dungeons can be started per day per account. Note that a follower dungeon, which can only be run at normal difficulty, will be considered as started once the instance is created, and that regular non-follower dungeons with players will not be impacted by this limit. We'll actively monitor the impact of this feature once it's live in all regions and look into adjusting the limit at some point in the future. Thank you for understanding. So I talked about this feature earlier this week, but my hope is that this feature gets a lot more people exploring dungeons, and that the WoW team will pick up on that by creating more questing experiences inside of these dungeon environments. So whether you're in a group of real people or if you're on your own, there can be additional quests and objectives inside of these spaces, and the developers are comfortable making them knowing that everyone interested can take part of it. Imagine a multi-stage quest line designed around a profession that has you and a few friends and or NPCs spending some time inside the dungeon. The dungeon itself doesn't need like a huge overhaul or major changes. Like, you're just progressing through, you're doing maybe a little backtracking and exploring. That's just a taste of what's potential in our future, and I hope folks start bringing that up in conversations, but what do you think of this? Once again, we're seeing that when you put the power into the player's hands, all hell breaks loose. Early this week in a surprise move, the team announced that the tier set appearances and bonuses for the upcoming Season 4 of Dragonflight will be decided by us, the players, by vote, and we would choose between what's been available throughout this expansion. Sorry, Judgment Set fans, but keep trying. Bit of a tangent, this underlines what we're expecting to see from Season 4. In terms of Big 3 content, it's blatant recycling, but with reason. This time we can expect some meaningful story updates with more open world stuff, questing, and other features to make it feel a lot better than Shadowlands did towards its end. The patch coming next week is in fact also part of this plan. But anyway, back to sets. Unlike in Shadowlands, which only had one set throughout the entire thing, Dragonflight has 3, so what's a team to do? Pass it off to the players. I'll provide a link to the menu polls where you can vote for each class's Season 4 tier set appearance and set bonus. Again, it's limited to what is already available during this expansion. Now, something that I think was a missed opportunity, the WoW team could have added a bit of spice into the mix and let us vote for any of the Dragonflight sets as the Season 4 appearance, regardless of armor type. Imagine the chaos if multiple classes like Death Knights and Hunters ended up voting for the Season 2 Priest set. Other classes may vote for the Evoker set so they can have at least more visibility. The voting period lasts for a week, meaning that as of this video going live, there's only like a few days left to vote, and from looking at the US and EU forums combined, the representation is not very high. For example, among Protection Paladins, a little over 10,000 players are going to decide what that set bonus is going to be. Now, this is the kind of problem with voluntary democratic voting that requires like more than a few clicks just to get to you, and this whole vote is not being very widely publicized. It's not going to surprise me if people don't hear about this at all. So we're not going to get a strong overall representation of the player's will. Now, to be fair, these motivated players represent trends, and in a way, it's kind of a referendum of what they, as a trend, what they thought of Dragonflight's tier set appearances and bonuses. Now, take me for example. I voted for the Season 2 Paladin sets because, well, I think it looks more Paladin than the other sets, and the vote seems to agree with me so far. I voted for the Season 3 Protection set bonus because I found it to be like more fun and thematic. However, I'm in the minority because my idea of fun just isn't the same as others. He thinks he's a balanced adult, but all he is wrong. From the looks of it, the Season 1 set bonus is going to win the vote. I found it to be like pretty passive and kind of boring, but it's also the most effective out of the 3 bonuses. It basically sims the best, and you know, that's another kind of voting preference. This might be the trend, but are there factors that could influence these trends, like forced voting or hiding the results until the voting period is over? I'd like to think that it might. No doubt for some, seeing the results beforehand would contaminate their vote because, you know, maybe some of them will be like, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. I didn't really consider that, and they change their vote. Or, you know what, shucks, I don't think I want to be on the wrong side of history. Now imagine if the voting system was more of a regular thing to the point where you could vote in-game. And for the sake of argument, let's say the game would like obnoxiously remind you over and over again to vote. Now there are going to be pros and cons to that. The pro being that obviously pretty much everyone is going to vote. But there are a lot of drawbacks too, because you bet that people are just going to choose the topmost choice or choose at random just to close the window. And if we could see the results beforehand, you know, I just explained that, and the problem would be further exacerbated, or worse, maybe we'd get like this troll army vote that goes for the unpopular idea for laughs. Another conversation has popped up in light of this vote. Why not just let players choose their set bonuses and appearances instead? Like, hey, give me that appearance and that bonus, boom, done. Or you know what, how about you give me that set and that set and that set too. Just give me all of them and then I can sort this out myself. And that's what the players need, freedom to make choices, especially the right choices. Or else, we have to be empowered to tailor our class and spec the way that we want, based on what the sims and the content creators tell us to, depending on the raid or the dungeon or the affix. Players can and should be able to play the way they want to, with consequences, because if they don't always adapt for every situation like the guides say, they'll be laughed out of their group and not be let back in until they conform, because if you're not copying the best, you're just being the worst, and that, friends, is freedom. And that's the show. For the past few expansions, I've had these moments of obsession where I suddenly become enamored with a certain game feature or a thing, and then I want to spend all my energy on it. One of the more recent features that really hit me were horrific visions back at the end of Battle for Azeroth. I had a ton of fun doing them. It was the one time so far, even up till now, where I played every class and I learned a ton about the game, even though it was just focused on this single activity. During Shadowlands, it was when the Covenant switching became a thing, and it just flipped my switch. It turned me into the transmog hunting fan that I am today. And just this week, professions. Now, I say that I'm pretty proficient on how they work, but in practice, I've only given myself time to work on only a few different kinds of professions throughout Dragonflight, at least until now. The other day, I asked myself, you know what? I have a boost that came with the War Within pre-order because everyone gets it. Shouldn't I just use it now? And so I did. I learned jewel crafting, and then I maxed out almost the whole thing in just a few hours. And I'm also very good at prospecting on top of that. I did the same thing with inscription, which I've neglected for most of this expansion. I maxed that out too, and I'm very good at milling to boot as well, so I managed to specialize in a couple of things and get my skill up to max. Since most of my alts are locked into alchemy and skinning because it's pretty easy money, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to pick up every profession towards the end of this expansion. I'm pretty confident that they are easy to max out and to make profitable, but of course that's if you already have the knowledge and the aptitude for it. So I've said numerous times that the profession revamp in Dragonflight, it didn't do a good job of giving players that early knowledge and the feeling of accomplishment early on, to get them excited enough to continue. I'm going to share some tips in the Monday video, and streams are going to be a bit more focused on this little venture for the next couple of weeks or months or so, because I'm going to be learning a bit more about the game and hopefully making a bit more gold, and that should be fun. For now though, that's a wrap. Let's give thanks to our fans over on Twitch and our beloved patrons, and of course thanks to you, viewer, for making it to the end. You fed the algorithm, and all you gotta do now is like this video, subscribe for more coverage, catch me live, and I'll catch you later. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.